Hello, Scott. Sounds like your audio is not on yet, or maybe it's mine's slow to.
There we go. There we go.
Oh, good.
That okay? All right. So how'd your other one go?
That was luckily that was not me. That was what's it called? The Outstanding Leadership in Disability Law Symposium Dinner Committee.
Oh, okay.
Or award committee. So.
Hi.
Hello, Sheree.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, Sherry. How you doing?
Good, and you?
Good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, as good as we can be.
So the question is, who's going first, you or me? I mean, I'm happy with you going first.
Oh, I was going to say I'm happy with you going first, but but either way, Javin, do you want us to go first or second?
Wait, who's going first?
Well, we've got Sharia, and where are you from? Where are you at right now?
I'm going first.
I'm in Atlanta.
So she's in Atlanta, and we're here.
I'm going first.
Okay, so Gavin says we can go first. So we only have two people. What are the time constraints? How do you want us to work this one? Last one we did 20, 20, 20. Do we do 30, 30?
So I'll take like 5 minutes at the top, and then we'll take 10 minutes at the end. So 45 minutes. So if you each talk for like
22 and a half.
Hold on, let's see. What did I just say? 45
minutes.
Half of 45. Yeah, like 22 minutes each.
Okay.
All right. So I will set a timer for 22 minutes. So Javin and I will go first, and we'll do about 22 minutes, and then you can take off.
All right.
Okay. So it starts at 10. Dom's going to talk for about 5 minutes, and then we have about 22 minutes after that.
Okay.
So we'll be done you'll be done by 10:30.
All right.
I'm going to sit and listen to Cherie, though. I want to hear what she has to say.
Okay.
Is that a new power chair behind you, Cherie, or is that still the same old improvised?
No, that's my scooter that I've had forever. My power chair died. And it's going to take a really long time to get another one. So this weekend, I'm hoping that I have found a used one that I can buy. We'll see this weekend. If it runs, I'm buying it. I don't care what kind of shape it's in. It just got to run. That's all. Because I can't get on the big bus in big red. She's too big. That is a large scooter. I don't know if you can see the whole thing or not.
No, I know
it is a big scooter, and if it just isn't working. I can't ride the big bus. I can only ride the lift van.
Really?
And I can't get indoors because that thing is so big. I can't fight with doors. So if it doesn't have an automatic door, I can't get in. So I'm having fun right now. My chair is unfixable, they said. The axle broke and the wheels came off. Sent me careening into a wall, scared the heck out of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you told me a lot in our last meeting. That's why I was asking.
Yeah. No, that's my scooter that I use to be able to, it's real big so that I can move around in my yard and see what, my grass and stuff looks like. Check and see if I got fire ants and that kind of stuff because I own my own house. So, check and make sure that the shutters are okay and the screens are all right, stuff like that, so that I can move around my yard. So it's a really big scooter and it's just too big to do much with. So, yeah. So I'm trying to get a used one to hold me until I can get a new one. It's going to probably take me about 6 months to get a new one because I have private insurance. And boy, are they a pain in the, you know what I mean? So, yeah. It's gonna work out.
Good.
It'll be all right.
Yeah. I mean, Yeah, as much as it sucks, at least thank goodness you've got an alternative that you can
Yeah.
turn to.
Yeah, you just have to make it work.
And that's it.
Right.
Okay, let's see. I'm gonna switch us over to broadcast because we'll start in like 1 minute.
Okay.
So all of our participants will be able to hear us.
Hi. Or should I do the royal wave?
So, and you guys know, you guys will you'll run your slideshow from your own computers, right? So.
No, I didn't know that.
Oh, so I'm sorry, Sheree, are you ready to share your slides from your local machine?
I can make that happen.
Okay.
You go
But
down to the
I thought
bottom.
Scott was going first.
Yeah, Scott's going first.
Okay,
Let me
great.
know when you want me to. I've got it ready, so just let me know when you want me to put share.
Okay. Why don't you click share now, and
Oh, okay.
we'll do the introductions in 1 minute.
Okay. Okay.
And Sheree, while you're not on, you can turn off your audio and you can mute your microphone and turn off your video, so you don't have to worry about
Okay.
people
which one is
surveilling you while you're not being attentive.
All right.
So Donald, okay, I got a couple things up here. The one surrounded in green. Will my slide change if I do that? Did that change?
Yeah. So yeah, you're in like the
Okay, so I just need to push that.
Yep.
There we go.
There you go.
All right, perfect. Okay, thanks. We're good. Okay, let me put it so you can scoot next to me a little bit so we can see you too. There we go. All right, so we're on the Zoom video.
Yeah.
So that way everybody can see us.
Oopsie.
Right. Close.
Is it locked? Oh, okay. That's Kelly's desk. So Donald's going to talk first, and then he'll let us talk. And we'll be done a little before 10:30. Thank you for doing this.
Okay, I'm just gonna check the captioning and then we'll get going. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's third installment of TASH's webinar series, Creative Solutions to the Community Living Crisis. We are excited to have Sheree Mitchell, Scott Shepard, and Javin Sanders with us today to talk about the housing crisis, options, and what you should know. For those of you who do not know TASH, we are a values and research-based advocacy association with an over 40-year record of advocating for the rights of people with disabilities. TASH is a coalition that unites people with disabilities, researchers, educators, service providers, family members, and others in the cause of guaranteeing that people with disabilities are able to participate in all aspects of life. In addition to this webinar series, we offer a scholarly quarterly research and practice for persons with severe disabilities, a popular magazine, Connections, local chapters covering 18 states, our annual Outstanding Leadership in Disability Law Symposium and Awards Dinner, this year honoring Judith Gran on June 24th at the American University Washington College of Law, and our annual conference on December 3rd through 5th in Baltimore, Maryland. You can learn more and become a member or register for one of our other events at tash.org. You can receive updates from TASH by signing up for our monthly newsletter or by following us on Facebook or on Twitter at TashTweet. A few technical words about how to participate before we begin. First of all, you can control the individual volume of your Zoom session by, if you roll your mouse over the Zoom window, a little menu will slide up from the bottom, and you will see you'll see a couple of icons, but three of particular interest. All the way to the left is the volume control. If you click the arrow next to the volume, to the speaker or the microphone icon, you can set your individual volume. Also, we are offering captioning for this webinar. The captioning link was included in the email reminder of how to participate in today's webinar. I've also posted it in the webinar chat box. Which brings us to the chat box. Also on that menu that slides up from the bottom is an icon that looks like a speech balloon. That's the chat box. I will be available throughout this webinar via chat. If you have any issues, if you're having problems participating, you can ask me a question there and I will try and address it. The format for today's webinar is that Scott, Javin, and Cherie are going to talk for about 50 minutes, and then there'll be about 10 minutes at the end for questions and answers. Zoom has a Q&A box as well, in addition to a chat box. Similarly, in that menu from the bottom, there's a box labeled Q&A. If you type your questions in there, I will read them out loud for all participants and for our three presenters to address. So today we're excited to have our three presenters to talk with us about how to cope with rising housing expenses and other housing challenges. Cherie Mitchell is first and foremost a self-advocate. She has spent the last 20 years working on behalf of people with disabilities and people who are elderly and mentoring and supporting self-advocates across Georgia and the nation. She is dedicated to helping people get out of nursing facilities and back into the community and helping people find housing. She has worked for the Georgia P&A, the Georgia Advocacy Office, and the Georgia Advocacy Office for nearly 12 years. She's a member of the Self-Advocacy Resource and Technical Assistance Center, or SARTAC, Advisory Committee, and the TASH Self-Advocacy Committee. She is a successful national grassroots organizer and has served as the national chair of the Long Road Home Campaign, an initiative to celebrate the success gained through the implementation of the Olmstead decision and to point to work that still remains to be done. Cherie is a former president of People First of Georgia, a cross-disability organization, a former chair of the NDRN Self-Advocacy Committee, and served on the NDRN Program Advocacy Committee. She is a seasoned public speaker and social justice poet writing from the disability experience. Cherie loves making a difference and helping people find their voice. Scott Shepard is the executive director of Avenues Supported Living Services, a nonprofit agency which provides community living and personalized day supports to adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities in North Los Angeles County. With Avenues SLS, Scott had the opportunity to begin services one person at a time, and it took 10 years to reach their goal to support 20 people in their own homes and community. Since that time, they have mentored 2 other agencies that provide community living services. Scott also teaches part-time at CSU Northridge on courses related to behavior assessment and PBIS and issues related to transition for students with disabilities. Scott serves on the Santa Clarita Valley Mayor's Committee for Employment of Individuals with Disabilities and on the board of CalTASH. Javin Sanders is someone supported by Avenues Supported Living. After being a rentor with his roommate in his home city of Santa Clarita for nearly 10 years, Javin and his roommate found that with rents skyrocketing, they could no longer afford the rents in the city with his Social Security benefits and part-time work income. Javin will share his story of how he became a joint homeowner with his roommate and are now both building equity in the home they jointly own. Please join me in welcoming Cherie, Scott, and Javin.
Great, thanks. And Javin and I are going to go first, and then we're going to hand it over to Cherie. So, all right. So thanks for the introduction, Donald. And we're just going to move right on in. Our main purpose when we talk about housing is really assisting people to acquire secure housing of their own. And we've had the luxury of supporting many people for over 10 years, 20 years, over 25 years. And so it's really been a journey, and nothing's happened immediately. But for those of you that are in the same situation where we're looking at long-term supports for people, I think it's reasonable to set some goals for home ownership and the same kind of things that we've done, and actually to accomplish these goals. Again, nothing's going to happen maybe in 6 months or even a year, but having those long-term goals will be really helpful. And we'll show you how we did it, or how we're doing it, because we're still not completely where we want to be. So a brief history of Avenues. In 93, our agency was mentored through another agency as part of California pilot project on supported living. Again, like Donald said, we started one person at a time. We've been implementing inclusive person-centered services since day one. We don't have any buildings or facilities that we own. In 1997, we branched off into our own nonprofit, and then took 10 thoughtful years to journey with 20 individuals on their path to community and a home of their own. From 98 to 2008, we assisted one person to become her own vendor, to become self-vendored with the state. And we assisted 7 people to move from institutional settings back into the community, and mentored a couple other agencies, because we never really wanted to be the biggest. We'd like to share what we do, but we feel that if we get too big, we could lose some of the quality. And so we've stayed at around a little bit over 20 people now, but that still allows myself and other folks, everybody in our agency does direct service or coaching as part of our jobs. We don't have anybody that sits in the office all day. So talking about housing specifically, from 1993, when we started, to 2002, when we first started, most people rented. That was what was typical. We didn't have quite as much of a housing crisis as we do now. People could affordably be able to pay rent for either a studio apartment or to split the rent and utilities with another housemate if they got like a 2-bedroom. And they would only be paying, they would still have money left over from their SSI or SSP or Social Security monies, whatever income they had in addition to any part-time work if they had any. They would be able to still affordably pay for the rent. Those things have changed over the last 20 years, obviously, but back at that time, most people were renters. 3 people that we supported had already received, or in around that time, received a housing voucher through the Housing Authority City of Los Angeles. That's our local housing authority. And that housing voucher allows you to only pay 30% of your income towards the rent. The rest is covered by the voucher. It's a lifelong voucher, and it is meant to be used in the LA City area. A local agency that I work closely with received a notice of funding availability to distribute these vouchers specifically for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, as long as we assisted with the paperwork portion. So it was like getting a gold certificate. It was awesome. And again, 3 people received those vouchers in that time. For everyone else that came on after that point, we assisted them to enroll on the Section 8 housing voucher waiting lists. They don't open those waiting lists up a lot in our area. In fact, over the last 15 years, they haven't been opened at all. So they no longer have a waiting list. The only way you can get a housing voucher in LA County or City of LA at this point is to be homeless. Those are the only emergency vouchers are being given out. So we let people know if they want to live under a bridge for a month, maybe we can get a voucher, but nobody really wants to go that option. So we signed people up during this 2-week enrollment period. Everybody that didn't have secure housing, we signed them up. And after 10 years, it took 10 years, then their name started to get drawn. And Jose's in front of his apartment where using a voucher that it took him a little over 10 years to get. We also assisted people to sign onto low-income units in the Santa Clarita Valley hoping that their name would be picked. So they started renting, but then they had to be on a waiting list to be eligible for one or two or three of the low-income units. And that could be the unit they still lived in, but then they would be able to sign on for a low-income lease. Some people were able to achieve that, and one person still lives in that low income. His rent has not changed in the last 15 years. He's got a great rate, but it's a 30-year deal, and he has 12 years left. So he's been 18 years with that low income, where he's only paying for a 2-bedroom apartment $1,000 a month between him and his roommate. They split. So again, $500 for his rent, which is unheard of in our area. But that plan that he has is only a 30-year voucher. So we need to come up with another plan in the next 12 years for what his next step is. Most people that require 24/7 support actually split their rent and utilities with a roommate, generally a roommate without a disability that they share the housing with. And that roommate may receive some pay for the support that they provide to that person. Utilities are always in the name of the person that's eligible for the low-income disability discount, because we have that in our area. Most states have that. So if the person with the disability who's low income, if the utilities, the water, power, all that kind of stuff is in the person's name, they're eligible for that discount. People are also get signed up for the Universal Lifeline service, even if that means getting one of the free cell phones through that, which people generally elect to do. In 2003, we actually had the first situation where a woman that we support, Cheryl, who's also on our board of directors, purchased her own place. She received a grant through Easter Seals to purchase a HUD repo. It was a condo, but when you look at this complex, it really looked like an apartment complex to me. But they split up the apartments and they sold them off. And it was a HUD repossessed unit. She was able to afford. And as a first-time buyer with a disability, and through this grant program that the Easter Seals helped hook us up with, and she also was able to use city funds to adapt her entry to have to remove the step and have more of a gradual slope to get into her apartment with her wheelchair, and also to adapt her bathroom for roll-in capability. She soon found out that it wasn't her dream home. If you can see the picture on the right, the dumpster looked like that every day. It was dumped every day, and people still dump trash all over the place. The pool was a different color every day, and we're like, oh boy. And her and her staff would get hassled parking in what we thought was her spot every night because other people wanted to park there, and it got to be more of a nightmare than a dream house. And after a year of living there, the water pipes burst right around Christmas time, and the homeowners association had no money, and so they billed everybody a couple $1,000s at Christmas to fix the water pipes. So Cheryl was not a happy camper initially with her first home. But then within 3 years, we had an opportunity to work with Cheryl to sell that home, or that HUD repo, and purchase her new home, which is actually now her dream home. And she purchased a double wide mobile home. You can see on the left, the first ramp, we just put in a wood ramp to get her in and out. But later, with the extra equity that she had earned in that other house that she sold, she was able to purchase a ramp to help her to access her home and adapt her bathroom a little bit as well. So she was our first homeowner, and just by only receiving SSI, SSP money only, she was still able to qualify and get into that with a bunch of generic resources as a first-time home buyer with a disability. Again, I wish we could find a lot of those options today. That was just like a one-time deal that we were able to get. From 2003 to 2012, we had 2 more individuals that received housing vouchers after being on waiting lists for over 10 years. 3 people acquired those long-term low-income units after being on the waiting list at the complexes in Santa Clarita. Cheryl, again in that time, became a homeowner twice, continuing to live in the second place that she bought. And we also have 2 ladies that were referred to us, and both of them are in their 70s right now, but they live in the homes they grew up in. So their parents helped to do some planning and decided that, great, we're just going to leave the houses to them. And in both situations, their parents have passed away. but they receive support that comes into the homes that they live in. One of the things that Avenues assists them with is sort of as a homeowner, or both of them, in fact, sort of share the home ownership with sibling or siblings. But with being a homeowner, we have to deal with what happens if the roof leaks, what happens if you need a new air conditioner, what happens if a tree falls on your house, all those things. You don't have a landlord anymore. So we have to assist and find resources in the area at, that are low cost, and help them to manage their budgets to be able to figure out how to do these things. And so that's part of the support that we help coordinate for them. And here are the two ladies that have these homes. So they are, again, in a secure place. Their families looked at this as an option years ago, which was brilliant because housing is not an issue for them, and they're obviously very comfortable in the places that they live. From 2013 through the present, we have a couple individual stories. As people had lived in rental situations for 10 or 20 years or more, as they begin to age, and we've supported them from their 20s on up into their 40s and 50s. Now, they've had family members that have passed on. So DH, his grandparents passed away. When the grandparents passed away, their home was sold, and that money was rolled over by Dan's parents into a home of his own after being 20 years renting. And so he's got a 2-bedroom place that he splits with a roommate. Her mom passed away. And when her mom passed away a few years ago, again, after over 20 years of renting, her sister and her family actually moved into mom's larger house and allowed HH to have the sister's house, which is a little smaller house for Heather and her roommate. And they live in there now the last couple of years, and it's been awesome. So now she is, instead of dealing with the rents that keep going up and up and up, they have a stable situation as well. For VC, this is Valerie. Valerie was one of the first persons we supported in 1993 when she was 22. And when her parents passed, they actually talked to us a lot about what could possibly happen. And they actually sold their house and moved into a condo in preparation that condo would eventually be Valerie's, and they would leave that to her. And that is indeed what happened. Now, when mom was the remaining parent still alive about 5 years ago, she didn't really want to wait to give her the condo. She said, wow, can I get a little equity out of my condo now? And I want to see Val in her new place. And so we helped her to help Valerie purchase a condo close by, and before mom passed away, so she got to see that transition. And the condo still remains in Valerie's trust, and actually another person we support rents that. Okay. And then DS, another gentleman we support, when he lives in a studio apartment, and he's lived in that studio apartment for 30 years. He knows everybody in the neighborhood. He's got an eye view to the street and all the drama that might be going on in his neighborhood, which he loves. And that apartment is actually 2 blocks away from the home he grew up in. And when he had an opportunity to get a Section 8 voucher, they would not accept them at his complex. And he chose to continue living in the studio apartment that he's been in for 30 years because he's got all the connections there. However, things have been a little easier since his aunt passed away. She did leave her home in a trust for him, and that money helps go pay for trips and other expenses that he might have that he can't afford, since most of his Social Security is SSDI money. 100% of that goes towards his rent for his tiny studio every month. And he has a couple hundred left over in an annuity that gives him a little extra spending money. And he also has a part-time job, but that's now all spending because now the trust will pay for some of his other needs that he has. It'll help for phone bills and things like that. JF and AB live in JF, that's John. They live in John's home from a trust that his mom set up before she passed away. And then the last person, Christopher, initially rented, but as his parents retired, they wanted to also see him in a more stable situation, and they assisted him to purchase a home. So these people were all fortunate enough to have a family member that had some income or were able to use their resources or plan to use their resources when they passed on to assist their sons and daughters to get, or their relatives to get secure housing. And so that's something that you want to start planning with people, to have them think of that. Renting we never know what it's going to be like in 10, 15, 20 years, or what's going to be available. In California, renting is almost impossible for a person that only receives SSI and SSDI in most of the major urban or suburban areas. So again, here's just some pictures, some examples of some of the people that we support. And I'm going to turn it over to Javin.
Hey, I'm working as important to me. It helps me to get good things in life. I enjoy working at Dollar Tree when I get a paycheck.
And you've worked there for how long?
15 years. In the holiday season, I also work at a second job known as the Salvation Army bell ringer. Another CIE job, I added the preschool, set it up, and tear it down. Holidays at the big tradition with my family.
Your family is really important.
Well, have multiple jobs have also helped me and my roommates to
I can't move that out of the way.
Leave an apartment in unsafe where
the rent.
The rent keep going up, up, up. Let me tell you what Crystal and I did. Me and I have an homeowners.
So you bought your own place.
Yeah.
So Javin owns 33% of the home, and Crystal owns 67% of the home. And both of them initially moved out together as roommates from their family home. You moved from your parents' house, she moved from her parents' house.
Yeah.
And then they rented for several years, and they get along great. They both love technology. They're both millennials, and they figured, oh, this relationship's going to continue a while as roommates. We get along great, and so they decided to purchase a house together. If either one of them wants to move out, they would buy the other one out. But at least both of them now are earning equity in this joint venture. We had to work with a realtor that actually was a relative of Crystal's, so he didn't, his commission was pretty squashed. We had to make things as tight as we could for both of these first-time homeowners, and we looked at whatever resources were available, and it was a little tight at first. But right now, at least now, it's going to be pretty stable. Their rent is not going to keep, or their mortgage, because it's not going to keep going up like it did previously. So we see this as a wonderful investment, and we're looking for other people to do this as well.
Yeah.
Some skills that you have learned.
I don't open the door for strangers. Always ask who is it first. I know who has shut off the water to the toilet overflows. I have my money on manager Sherry, who helps to me to pay my bills.
So who do you split the mortgage and rent with?
You, Avenues.
No, who do you split it with? Who pays the other half?
Me and Avenues.
You and
Crystal.
Right, Avenues doesn't pay it, right? It's you and Crystal. And how often do you see your family?
Very important to me.
And you see them every week?
Every other time.
Okay.
Where do I have the recycling? My earnings goes to my money manager Shirley for the mortgage and expenses.
Right. And then with recycling, you even put half of that towards some of your bills, and the other half's for spending money, right?
Yeah.
So Javin's still got a pretty tight budget. The more recycling he does, the more extra spending he gets. But he does have to help manage that money. The regional center in California offers the option of a person who's a money manager who will help pay for the bills first and then allocate additional monies that are left over from Social Security and paychecks to spending after the bills are paid. And so that's who Shirley is. She's a person that is funded as a separate entity that assists with money management.
I am a lot more flexible since I moved into my own place. I have done lots of new things, including vacations, moving into our own place, and going to Sacramento this past weekend in practice postulate in TASH. My family thinks I have been pretty amazing.
And where's that?
At the governor's office at the state capital of the TASH conference last week in Sacramento.
So, all right, and just to finish up, we're going to turn it over to Cherie. But avenues right now in 2020 where people live, we support 11 people that live in their own homes. 2 people have, oh, I can't see that, but have purchased, 2 people have qualified to purchase their own homes, and that would be Cheryl and Javin. And 9 people, the families assisted them to purchase. 1 person rents in a secure home where we have, John owns a 3-bedroom home, and we have one person that's been a roommate of John for a long time, and they moved into that home together, and they have a 3rd roommate that is also a support person, and they split the rent and utilities 3 ways. So that's still a secure home. The rent is kept at the same rate, so they don't have to worry about the rents going up. So both of them live in that secure rent, at least, home. 4 people have the housing vouchers that continue to have that. 1 is portable, which means for Julie had to live in the city of LA for a year, but then she was able to transport that voucher and use it in the city of Santa Clarita, an adjacent city, and because these vouchers have portability. So it is able to follow her where she goes for her lifetime, as long as she continues to use it. 2 ladies, again, live in the homes they grew up in. 1 is renting but looking to purchase a home with his roommate. We were able to help him to win a battle with Social Security, and he got a large underpayment that came back to him, and we're looking to use that for a down payment on a condo for him and his roommate that have lived together for about 13 years. And then 3 people rent with a locked-in affordable rate that's affordable. And we have 1 person that rents, that pays 90% of his SSI and SSP towards rent. And this is an untenable situation, and he is our main priority right now, that we're really looking at finding ways for him to either become a homeowner, or we just went to a town hall meeting with him with our local legislators, and our county supervisor is working to get some federal monies, that means my time is up. Federal monies, they said it's going to come from the federal government to assist with housing, and we're encouraging that to be put into individual vouchers. And I'm going to turn it over to Cherie.
Hi. So I'm Cherie. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Great. All right. So I need to bring up and share my PowerPoints, right?
Yep.
All right. So I'm clicking on share. I'm going to here, and I'm going to share. So, all right. So the name of my PowerPoints is called Path to Housing, because, you know, every housing authority has some latitude as to how they work, and there are different things available in different communities.
Cherie, can you switch to the slideshow view so we can see the whole thing?
Sure. There we go. So,
Perfect.
Introductions. You know, if you have a housing question that you want answered really bad today, be sure and type it in, and we will try to answer it for you. So, path to housing. The first thing that I tell people is there's no quick answers. There are a long waiting list for income-based housing. And so we end up with a strategy of short-term and a long-term goal. The long-term goal, of course, is get into income-based housing. Short-term goal is get a roof over your head that you can afford. So the big thing that you have to realize is self-advocacy is key to finding housing. So one of the things that we've discovered in doing this work for 20 years is that a lot of people don't understand the rental process. So the first thing I want to do is just explain the rental process. You look for the housing, and then once you find the housing, you sign the lease, and then you move in, and then you follow the rules and do the required paperwork every year. And there might be inspections if it's income-based. You know, I've had people to call me, they've lost their housing because they didn't do their paperwork on time. So you have to do that. to make it work. You've got to follow the rules. You've got to do the paperwork on time, and you've got to pass the inspection. Now, one thing that I want people to realize is that do not sign a lease until you've inspected the apartment you will be living in. I have people call me all the time complaining about they signed a lease, they were told the apartment would be accessible, and then it wasn't. Just the other week, I was on a MARTA mobility van, which is the lift van. As you can see, I have limited mobility. I use wheels. And this couple come out of the apartment, and he's literally having to lift her chair down this 4-inch step. And when they get on the bus, I said, well, you guys must have been in that apartment before your disability. And she said, no. I said, you've always been in the chair since you've lived there? She said, yes. I said, can I ask you a question? And she said, sure. I said, why would you get an apartment with a step? She said, they told us it was accessible. We believed them and signed the lease without going and seeing the unit first. So always see the apartment that you're going to have, not the apartment that they use to show everybody, but the apartment that you're going to have, and make sure that it's accessible enough for you. Now, I had a guy that did this training here in my office, and he comes back to me a couple of months later, and he had a Section 8 voucher, and his housing authority coordinator went with him, and it wasn't accessible enough. And they gave a spoken promise that it would be made accessible. And he went ahead and signed the lease. And then months later, it still isn't done. And he comes back to me. He said, I should have listened to you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, I signed the lease based on a spoken promise that it would be made accessible. And I didn't have it in writing. And then they tried to not do the accessibility. And so, you know, a lot of the good news is he had his Section 8 coordinator with him, and they heard them promise to make the accessibility, and we were ultimately able to make them do it. But just signing a lease based on a promise, a spoken promise of we'll make it accessible, is not a smart thing to do. So, you know, you got to understand the lease. Every lease can be different. There are like these template leases, but then they'll do things like do house rules and things like that. So you just need to understand the lease, and you need to know what is required of you, because it's a legal contract. Once you sign it, you're basically saying, I've accepted this unit as is. Unless there's something in writing stating that there's going to be some changes made. You know, it's a legal contract, and you are responsible for the rent. And so some of the other lease issues that people end up in is roommates and joint leases. And so I had this one young lady who called me, and she ended up owing a lot of money, and she was very upset about owing the money. And she called me and wanted to know what she could do. And I told her, you know, when you left that unit, you should have gotten off the lease. And by not getting off the lease, you were still on the line for half that money. And so she ended up owing a whole lot of money. And I just recommend to everyone that if you leave a roommate or joint lease, make sure to get your name off the lease. It can be done. They don't like to do it, but it can be done. So another problem that people have called me and told me these stories of ending up owing lots of money to the landlord is pest control issues. Had one lady call me. She said, we got bed bugs. We packed up that night and left. And she didn't turn in her keys. She didn't nothing. She just left. And so, you know, that's not the way you handle pest control. That's a great way to end up owing a lot of money. And what I tell people is that if you've got any kind of repairs that needed to be done, any kind of pest control that needs to be done, put it in writing. Do a written maintenance request. Because once you put it in writing, you've got something that you can use to go back and say, you know, I put it in writing in June that I needed this. And then when you come back in July, I put it in writing, I needed this. And if nothing still hasn't happened, then I refer people to legal aid, because that is a tenant law issue. That is not a disability law issue. But you need to work with them around getting that fixed. Because again, you can end up owing a lot of money if you just pack up and leave overnight and don't do a proper move out. And we'll talk about that process shortly. So to do a successful housing search, there are certain documents that you need. You need a copy of your state issued ID. It has to be current. You need a birth certificate. You know, a lot of people complain to me, why do I got to give them a copy of my birth certificate? Why have I got to give them a copy of my bank statement? Well, first of all, the birth certificate and the ID and the Social Security are HUD required documents. They got to have it. And then if you're going to get into income-based housing, you've got to show that your income is such that you qualify for the program. Now, it used to be that a lot of them would require 6 months of bank statements. Now, a lot of them have moved away from that. Housing authorities have some latitude to be able to organize things the way they want to organize it. So a lot of housing authorities have moved away, and apartment complexes have moved away from getting 6 months worth of bank statements. Instead, they are checking your IRS profile in place of those 6 months bank statements. And then you've, of course, got to give your income proof, which for a lot of people with disabilities is their awards letter from Social Security showing what they are getting that year. And it is possible that you can run into an apartment complex that wants a specific award letter with some control numbers up in the right top corner. You just have to work with your whoever you're applying and see what they are requiring. And again, another thing I've seen is an apartment complex requiring that the awards letter not be more than 30 days old when you move in. So, but to get on the waiting list, they may still do that, even though the waiting list may be a year long. You just need to be aware that you just need to work with the apartment and figure out what their requirements on those documents are. Another thing that you need to know when you're looking for housing is that, number one, you don't quit. You know, I explain to a lot of people that for me, becoming a person with disability, I have a physical disability that I aged into. And it was a lot like being dropped in a maze. And, you know, I'd do one thing and hit the brick wall, and I'd turn around and I'd do something else and hit the brick wall and turn around. And I'd have to keep doing that until I worked my way out of the maze and got what I needed and want. But if you quit, you don't get it. And so you don't get to quit. You need to understand what you need and want, including where, because that's important. Where is important. If you need to be at, say, Shepherd Hospital 3 times a week to get a shot that you have to have for your MS, you don't want to live in a place where it takes you 3 hours one way to get to that hospital. So, you know, and I personally, when I look for housing, I want to be within 2 blocks of a grocery store, because I like to eat a lot of fresh vegetables and fruit, and I don't want to buy it, you know, like a week, 2 weeks ahead, because it might ruin. So I like to just buy my food like 3 days ahead at the most. And so for me, I want to live near a grocery store. I also want to live near a pharmacy. I want to be within 2 blocks of a pharmacy because I need to pick up my meds regularly. So, you know, these are things to think about. When you're trying to create opportunity, one of the things you can do is to make a list of what you need and want. When I married my late husband, we both had wheelchairs, and we were having trouble because I was working full time, so we didn't qualify for income-based housing. But even with income-based housing, still you need to know what you need and want. And so it helps to create opportunity when you've got a small stock of physically accessible housing. So what we ended up doing is we made a list. We needed a 0-step entrance. We needed at least a 36-inch wide hallway. We needed a bathroom that we could get into it in our chair and have, you know, things set up in a way where we would have grab bars and be able to transfer to the toilet and to the bathtub. We were able to make a bathtub work at that point with a bench, with a shower bench. And so we went looking for a bathroom that was wide enough that they would allow grab bars to be put up in, and that we would be able to make it work to do the showering and the bathrooming. So, you know, that's how you create opportunity. Now, I have a lot of people that I work with, and they'll tell me, I want to live in small town America. Well, that's what we'll call the name of the city. And the city is very small, has very limited housing opportunities. And then you've been looking for a year. Another way to create opportunity for yourself is to expand your search area. And so that can be important. You know, you got to think about ways to create opportunity. Who gets in first? Somebody that applies to 3 places or 12 places? Well, of course, 12. You know, I mean, that's common sense. And you want to be organized. I recommend to the people that I work with to keep a journal. You know, keep a journal stating that an example, I applied to Piedmont High Rise in June, and I called in August, and they said that I was number 125 on the waiting list. Then I call again in February, and now I'm number 152. Okay, something's wrong there. You shouldn't be going backwards. So if you've got a journal and you can say, well, I talked to June on June the 12th, and she told me I was 152, and you're now telling me I'm more than that. Something's wrong, and that's the kind of evidence that you can go and talk to somebody and try to get some help to try to figure out what's going on and get that corrected and get you on that list in a way that you're moving up it, not moving down it. So being organized, keep a journal. And then you got to know what you can afford. You know, you need to do a budget. It's very important, particularly if you're having to do a short-term and a long-term goal. You want to know what you can afford for the short term, as you know, as well as what you can afford for the long term. And then you've got to educate yourself. And the fact that you're on this call today, on this webinar, that's what you're doing, is educating yourself. So let's talk about income-based housing. So there are many types of income-based housing, I have to tell you. So, you know, of course, your first question is going to be, is this income-based housing? And they may say yes, but then you need to follow that up with a more specific question and say, is this where the rent is 30% of my income or 40% of my income? There are some housing authorities that have raised that to 40% at this point, and I think we're going to see more of that in the future. And then, because if they say that the rent is 30% or 40% of your income, then this is probably Section 8 housing. So let's talk about the 2 types of Section 8 housing, all right? So there's that home choice voucher that is assigned to the person. We heard Scott talking about how one of them had a voucher that was portable after a year. That is the common practice with housing authorities, is that when you first get the voucher, you have to stay in their area for the first year. And I'm gonna tell you, it's not always easy to port those vouchers. A lot of times it ends up taking a lawyer to make that happen. But that voucher, that particular voucher, is mainly known as a home choice voucher. And that's where the voucher is assigned to you. And you take it and you find a place that will accept it and use it for your rent, to cover part of your rent. Now, the other type of Section 8 that's available is what's known as property-based voucher. And this is where the voucher is assigned to the property. So you go to the apartment complex and you apply for the apartment, and the apartment will be 30% of your income. But when you leave that property, the voucher doesn't go with you. It stays with that property. So that's a property-based voucher. So I want to talk for a minute about how to do a successful housing search with a Section 8. Well, everything that I've just talked to you about applies. I want you to know that. But there are 3 things that you need to stay on top of with a Section 8 voucher that is assigned to you, the person. That's that home choice voucher. You need to, number 1, know what the area is of that housing authority. Because say like you're here in Georgia and you're in DeKalb County. We have a DeKalb Housing Authority. We have a Decatur Housing Authority. You cannot use a voucher from the DeKalb Housing Authority for a Decatur apartment because that area is assigned to the Decatur Housing Authority. You need to know what area is assigned to that housing authority because that's where you've got to look for housing. If you've got one of those home choice Section 8 vouchers that are assigned to the person. And you need to know how much the voucher is totaled for because there is a median rent for the area that is where they figure out what's the average rent for the area. And that's what they'll pay. So say the average rent for the area is $800. But you know, your area is now in gentrification and the rent has gone up a lot around town, or brand new building has just been built and they're charging $900. Your voucher is only going to cover up to $800, and that extra $100 has got to be paid. And the Section 8 voucher is not going to do it. So you know, you would end up owing the 30%, and then you would owe the extra $100. And a lot of housing authorities won't even allow you to do that. So you need to understand how much your voucher is for when you're looking for a place, and make sure it lines up with the value of that voucher. And then you need to understand the deadline. Those vouchers, you have about a 3-month deadline with most housing authorities. But you can check, find out what's the deadline that you need to have it used by. So, you know, because you want to make sure you're in the apartment by that deadline. And if you're not, then you're going to need to ask for an extension. And you're going to want to do that in writing. You want to ask for an extension. And some housing authorities will give you one. And I want to remind you that when you're using a Section 8 home choice voucher that is assigned to the person, that wherever you find to use that, whatever apartment you find to use it on, it's going to have to pass an inspection, and you need to include that in the timeline because you can't be in the process and waiting on the inspection and the deadline come up. You still got to ask for that extension. You have to be in that apartment by that deadline, or you need to do a written extension request. Very important things you got to know when you're using these vouchers. So let's talk about the move out process for rental. So, you know, I tell everybody, do those inspections, do that move-in inspection, do that move-out inspection, and turn your keys in. You know, but don't turn your keys in until the move-out inspection is done. Because here's the thing. Say you didn't do your move-in inspection. I saw this happen to a lady. She ended up owing money. She did her move-in, didn't do the move-in inspection and review it to make sure it was accurate. And they didn't have on there that there was a hole in the bedroom in the back right corner. And it was there before she moved in. but it wasn't marked on the inspection, the move-in inspection. So when she got ready to move out, they made her pay for repairing that hall because it wasn't marked on the move-in inspection, but it was on the move-out inspection, and she was liable for the repair. Another thing that has happened that I saw happen once, had a lady, she had done her move-in inspection, that went well, but when she got ready to leave, the management office was in a really busy, they were short-handed, and they said, just give us your keys, we'll get to the inspection. Well, they took 3 days to get to the inspection. And somebody had broke into the apartment because they realized nobody was living there, and they tore that apartment up. And she ended up owing a bunch of money for the repairs because when they did the move-out inspection, got around to doing the move-out inspection, the apartment was in terrible shape, and she had to pay to restore it back to what the move-in inspection said was the shape of that apartment. So it's very important. And like I said, I had a lady once who packed up one night and just moved because of bed bugs, and she didn't turn in her keys. If you're going to do a move out, you need to do it properly, and you need to turn in your keys, because if you don't turn in your keys, they're going to have to do an eviction to get the apartment back legally, and you will be liable for all that eviction process and the court costs and stuff to do that eviction process. So it's very important to understand the move in, move out, and what you should do and what your responsibilities are. So let's talk about some of the reasons and solutions for when people get denied for an apartment. So some of the reasons that they can get a denial: they owe money to another apartment, an eviction in the past, criminal background, bad credit, lease violations, poor rental reference. Those are all things that you can be denied. Your application can be denied for moving into an apartment. So let's talk about some possible solutions for that. Payment plan, letter of extenuating circumstances, expungement. A payment plan, you would need to get that in writing and then submit it, and you would want to do an appeal. Same with the letter of extenuating circumstances. I've actually had a gentleman once who was a cat burglar, and he had later in life had been in a car wreck and was paralyzed from the neck down. And so he wrote a letter of extenuating circumstances explaining that he was paralyzed from the neck down. He would never be a cat burglar again. He wouldn't be crawling through no more windows. And they actually let him in the apartment for that. And then if you've got a criminal background, you could try doing expungement. I don't know a lot about expungement, but I do know that people have done it and been able to get that off of their backgrounds so that when their criminal background check is done, they come up clean. You'd need to probably talk to legal aid about that. I'm running out of time. So the other thing is how to make a reasonable accommodation request. Number one, always do it in writing. Always do it in writing and explain why you need it. And they do have the right to ask for a doctor's statement as proof that you need it, but always do it in writing. And then I had a question that came in before the webinar started about online resources. So 2 good online resources: socialserve.com, affordablehousing.online.com. The affordablehousing.online.com will tell you when waiting lists are open and like that, and Social Serve will tell you what's available at that time. Again, some of these online sources have free services, and then then they also have some paid services. So you need to be aware of that. All right. So I got to figure out how to get out.
Okay. We're nearly at the end of our hour, but if we have maybe a couple of questions for Scott and Sheree. they can maybe address them. I see that Scott has already answered 3 via the text. Maybe if while we're waiting to see if anyone else has a question, he could answer them in the audio stream. The questions were.
They went away when I. Oh, good. If you could read it. That'd
So,
be great.
is this the housing choice voucher? Are these houses in the person's name or an LLC? Or what? Well, there's a couple questions. So, one was, is this the housing choice voucher?
And so I guess I'm not exactly sure. Cherie would probably know more about the housing choice voucher, but for our vouchers, they are specific vouchers that come through either the city or the county within California. So in our suburban areas, again, we don't have any access to these anymore. We're trying to get some additional access through federal funds that can be earmarked towards integrated housing, affordable housing for our folks.
So to me, that sounds like it might be a state or a city-funded voucher, but more than likely, if it is a regular voucher, it is probably then a home choice voucher. Some home choice vouchers, some public housing authorities do offer using your Section 8 to buy, to do home ownership. So,
are the houses in the person's name or an LLC trust, or how does the person get a home? How does a person give a home to their child?
Okay, and I had answered that first of all, if a person lives in the home they own, it is not counted as an asset. So that way it doesn't impact their benefits at all. So some people live in, like Javin, he lives in the home that he is owning, or he is, working to own. He is paying the mortgage for that. Other people, the families have set up a special needs trust, and the home goes into the trust, and it may be with that one person, or maybe them and their siblings. And so both of those have happened. The special needs trust does take a nominal fee, a few $1,000s to set up by a family. Not all families have those resources, but some have done that.
So also in some states, they have what's known as microboards, and the microboard can actually own the house for the person.
What kind of federal money is available?
So I had answered that one just related to the housing vouchers. We had a town hall meeting 2 weeks ago, and our local county supervisor was there. And we had actually Ben Carson from the federal government came to our state to address the housing issue about a month ago. And she said, regardless of what you hear with all the politics, she said the federal administration is very willing to work to address some of the housing issues and to provide some funds. And I said, okay, great. We would like to meet to really ensure that funds are going towards integrated, affordable housing for people, and also to improve or expand the use of personal vouchers for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities of low income. So we're keeping our fingers crossed.
Cherie, do you have anything to add?
No, not to that one. It just depends. Again, there is a lot of freedom with the housing authorities to set up different programs, and then a lot of them can get some of the local money from either the state or the county or the local municipality and use some of that. And so it just depends.
And one of the things that just coming from our TASH perspective, we've seen some monies that have gone out that sort of go towards funding for what I've termed as disability ghettos. I saw some situations where an entire complex was purchased and used for people that came out of state hospital settings. And these folks were sort of locked in there. They didn't really want to live with all these people from the state hospital, but the rent was so good they couldn't afford to move out. And it just became like a disability ghetto. It wasn't, we really want to stress that we need to provide integrated options like everybody else has. We don't want to be segregated or warehoused.
No, I totally agree with you on that, Scott, that we need integrated settings. A lot of people call it scattered site housing when you're doing rental, making sure that you're not in a place where it's all people with disabilities. And it can be done, and it can be done well. You know, Atlanta Housing Authority a few years ago went through and tore down all their projects and built these mixed income sites. We were the first to ever do the mixed income here in Atlanta. And they ended up with the largest inventory of accessible units. But the problem is that they didn't sign the rental subsidy to those units. They just said 30% of the property is going to be income based. And so there were people that needed those units, couldn't get in them because the property already had its 30%. And so we had to go back and do some advocacy and get those accessible units locked down as the units that would be covered by the subsidy. But when it comes to ownership, you know, you can also look at just the regular down payment assist programs and things like that. So, I mean, there's lots of options.
Are any of the people you support having more significant needs, e.g. 24/7 full care support?
So for me, I did sort of address that. Yeah, actually 70%, it used to be 60%, but now some of our people have aged a little more. We support a gal in her 80s, used to be our most independent person, and now she receives 24/7. But most of the people we support have always needed 24/7 support available to them that may be on the spectrum, have communication and behavior needs, etc. And that's what they need to be safe in their own place. So the majority of the people that we have are people that require significant support.
Unfortunately, in Georgia, most of our waivers do not do 24/7. So, you know, you have to get creative. I've seen where they would buy a house and buy a 4-bedroom house, and 2 of the bedrooms would be rented to a person with a disability, and both had a waiver program that provided attendant care. And then what they would do is that the one person's attendant would come in and work 12 hours, and then the other person's attendant would come in and work 12 hours, and they would share attendant services. But you've got to make a lot happen, because that's not the way things are set up. You've got to get the provider to agree to do that, and that can be the hardest part.
And then I guess we'll take this as the last question before we quit. Are any nonprofit agencies purchasing houses and then renting them?
And so houses, yeah, I know that United Cerebral Palsy has done some of that. And there's a home project in the West Side LA area. But again, the key thing is we just want to make sure that how they choose to use these funds. Sometimes it's easy for the powers that be to say, oh, we're just going to put everybody in the same complex or in the same block. And it's like, we want it to be integrated. We really have to advocate to make sure that the housing options are integrated, like Cherie said.
I guess we'll ask one follow-up here. For people with full-time support, do the staff live in shifts?
For the people I support, we when people live in, generally they're called roommates, and they split the rent and utilities. So we have many situations, I guess, for affordability. I know when I moved out for the first time, I had to move out with a friend because I couldn't afford a place on my own. And we split the rent and utilities until we got other relationships and did our own thing. And the same thing for the people we support. If they have a roommate in a 2-bedroom place, for example, they'll split the rent and utilities. Generally, for our roommates, we ask that they be responsible. If somebody needs 24/7, we ask that they be responsible for that overnight support and getting them ready for the next day for at least 5 days a week. And then the other 2 days, we say, hey, if you want to, be on a date or go on a thing and not be responsible for coming home at a certain time, no worries. You're still the roommate, but we'll have somebody else come in and do what we call the overnight provide for the overnight needs for the person. They might be on a inflatable, mattress that they sleep on for the night for those nights that the roommate's not available.
So,
Well,
I'm sorry.
let me just say that I'm seeing a lot of creativity, out of the box stuff going on in Georgia, where, take myself for instance. I have 2 roommates. Their rent includes the utilities, the cable, even Wi-Fi. But the thing is, I give it to them at a much lower price than what is being offered. And in return, their part of their rent is doing things around the house that I can't do. And so I've got, and then because I'm older and I'm coming up on 60 with a bullet, I'm legally considered a senior. I have what's known as a senior co-housing thing going. Everybody in my house are people that are seniors. And, they, for some reason or another, can't get into income-based housing. And they rent a room for me, and I give them a discounted rent. I include all the utilities and Wi-Fi and cable, and they serve some of their rent doing sweat equity so that they cover what I can't do. One of them has the job of putting my shoes and socks on me. So that's one of those things I can't do myself.
Well, we have a few more questions, but we're 10 minutes past, so I think it's best that we wrap it up here. This concludes the housing crisis, options and what you should know. Our series continues next week with episode 4 on March 20th, this same time, 1:00 p.m. Eastern, with the housing crisis creative solutions that will be presented by Ruthie Marie Beckwith, Shay Bernard, Hope Dittmeyer, and Joe Wykowski. This episode will be available as a recording. I'll send it out next week once it becomes available. In the meantime, thank you to Cherie, Scott, and Gavin for taking the time to talk with us today about options and what you should know. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.